Hello, I am Jamie with Stonemeyer Games, and welcome to a special edition of my weekly livecast for a few different reasons. One is you can notice in the background that the background has changed, and that's because I have moved for the first time in 14 years. I work from a home office, and so this is my new home office, or at least part of my home office. And I'm still getting settled in, as you can see by the random stuff in the background there. This is also a special edition because the University of Alabama, two teachers at University of Alabama, two professors, reached out to me with questions from their students about the board game industry and Kickstarter and things like that. And so I'm going to focus for the first part of this live cast on answering those questions from those students, and then I will scroll back and answer your questions and talk about other random topics. Yeah, that's the plan. So let's start with a question from Sean. Sean says, when designing a game, how long does it take to balance the fun versus the math of it? It really depends on the game, Sean, but you're right. I think that's a great question because you're talking about the two things that are really difficult to figure out when designing a game. And a lot of it comes, I think, from blind playtesting. When I design a game, I try to design the fun and the balance of it from the start, but it always plays out very differently on the table, even in local playtesting. And then I send it out to blind playtesting to find out all these other imbalances and overpowered and underpowered things that I hadn't thought of before. So that can usually take, for me, it usually takes around 3 waves of blind playtesting to do that. With each wave including between like 5 and 8 groups of playtesters, each playtesting it 3 times. I'll jump back and forth. I have questions from 2 different classes, so I'll jump over to a question from Madison. Madison says, what are some creative advantages of running a Kickstarter campaign versus working for an established board game company? I think they both actually have creative advantages. Running a Kickstarter campaign is nice because you have complete creative freedom. You can do whatever you want with your main audience in mind. So you can really do anything you want, and if the audience doesn't respond to it, then you may not fund. But it just gives you complete creative authority and freedom. If you work at an established board game company, your authority might be a lot less because you're working for somebody else who has a different vision than you might have. But I think it depends on the company. If it's a company that you really love and they really love you and they love what you bring to that company, then they might really respect your creative vision and your creative process there. So I think it really depends on the company. But if you want complete creative autonomy, running your own company or running a Kickstarter campaign would be the way to at least test those waters. I have a question from Joel here. And just to let you all know, I am not, Facebook isn't showing me comments right now, one of those days. So that's fine so far because I have all these great questions from students. But I just wanted to let any of you know who are joining me that I don't see any comments. Feel free to comment so I can see if I actually am missing anything. I'm sure I am. Joel says, much has been made of negative influences of online games on teenagers. Do board games suffer from the same influences, or do I see board games as having a more positive impact? First, I should say I'm far from an expert on this at all. I have my own opinions of whether or not online games actually have negative influences on teenagers. I think anything in its extreme can be bad. So if someone's playing the same game for 10 hours a day, I don't think that's very healthy. That's whether it's a board game or an online game. If someone is playing a board games an hour or 2 a day, or an online game for an hour or 2 a day, and they're having creative problems, they're going through creative problem solving, they are learning communication skills, I think those are great things. And those types of things in moderation, I think, can be very positive instead of negative, but in the extremes, they could both be somewhat negative. Madison has another question over here. Madison says, Scythe is currently ranked number 9 on Board Game Geek. How do I think its reception has affected your game's success and the way that you've designed subsequent expansions? What challenges in design and balance does Scythe present relative to simpler games? Lots of questions there. So part of it is about the game's success and marketability. It has been it's been great for Scythe itself that people have enjoyed playing it, because then it rises through the ranks of Board Game Geek, and anyone who uses Board Game Geek to decide which games they want to buy, they get to see one of my games in the top 10, which is great. How has it impacted the way I've designed subsequent expansions? I don't know if the ranking really has, or how people have received it. It's more I know there's a market for Scythe expansions because people have asked for it, and so I've had the freedom to actually make them. Um, Whereas if a game like didn't sell well and people didn't care for it, I'd be a lot more hesitant to make expansions for it. Madison also said, what challenges in design and balance aside present to relative to simpler games? It's just a lot more like similar to what I said to Sean's question. It's a lot more blind playtesting is required for a game like Scythe with all that asymmetry. We playtested it so often and with so many blind playtesters, over 1,000 blind playtest sessions to get that game as balanced as it could, and we still miss things even then, especially with people playing it since then many times. The same people playing it the same number of tons of times, hundreds of times, and just hundreds of thousands of people playing the game and discovering different little anomalies in it, outliers. Opposed to a simpler game where it's you don't have as many moving parts and as much asymmetry. Kayla says, what do I predict will be the next big change or innovation in board games? The next big change or innovation in board games. Part of it, I think, is already happening. And that part is that game designers... Okay, sorry, Kayla. Yeah, let's see. I'm getting a little clue on how to see the comments, but it's not working. I'm not getting the option today to see the comments on here. Yeah, I'm not seeing that on my screen today. Someone's sending me a text to give me a clue on how to do it, um, but it's not giving me the option today. Anyway, that's fine. So Kayla, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Kayla, what do I predict will be the next big change or innovation in board games? I think so. The thing that I think I'm already seeing happen, and I think it'll happen even more, are better tutorials and better ways to get people playing that first game, rather than giving someone a 30-page rule book that they need to know everything about before they can take their first turn. So I think game designers are doing a better job, and game publishers are doing not a better job. I don't want to say it's necessarily bad to have a robust rule book. But I think we're thinking more about, hey, how can we actually get people to get this to the table for the first time? And I think we'll continue to see changes and innovations to make that happen even better. Some of them digital, and some of them built into the cardboard version of the rule books. Ellie says, after reading about the game Wingspan, it seems it targets a relatively niche market of gamers. How do I market this game to attract customers who may not even be interested in birding? Do I have any other games that are similar because of their detailed subject? Yeah, this is an interesting question. Because in the world of Euro board games, there are some traditional themes that we've seen a lot. Like we see games about trains, we see games about farming, but we also see more and more, we see different themes because I think people, there are already great farming games out there. So even though gamers are comfortable in farming themes, Euro gamers in particular, they also might want something new. And so I think gamers and publishers have been cognizant of that. And so I think Wingspan is a great example of that. Even though a gamer may not be excited at first by the theme of birding or collecting birds or bird watching, because it's a fairly unique theme and because the mechanisms of the game appeal very much so to Euro gamers, it's been extremely popular among gamers. We're on pace to sell over 200,000 copies of Wingspan this year alone, which is incredible. So Ellie says, how do you market the game to attract customers? How do I market it by sending it to reviewers. That's a big part of it. I send the game to a ton of reviewers, and that can often help people get past the theme and see, oh, this game actually has really cool mechanisms. I'll give it a try. And we found that a lot of people who give it a try actually are a lot more excited about birds than they were before they gave it a try. Do you have any other games that are similar because of their detailed subject? Do we have any other games? So Viticulture is a game about, it's kind of a farming game, but it's about running a vineyard. It's a little niche. Yeah, I think that's the only one that's a little niche so far. I'm trying to think of anything that we have in the works. Yeah, nothing else that comes to mind in particular. Dawson says, we read that the expansion for Wingspan had a 12-hour playtest party. Is that how playtesting normally takes place in great intensive chunks? I'm I'm not familiar with that 12-hour playtesting party. That may have been something that the designer did. It isn't something that I did as a publisher. I usually playtest locally with a group of people. Maybe we play once, maybe we play twice in a row, but not 12 hours. That's a long time. But it's possible that some of the lead playtesters did that, and I don't know about it. It's also possible that the designer did that, but not that I'm aware of. Steven says, what is the most important thing for a game to avoid to be successful? That's tough. That's a great question, Steven. One thing that comes to mind is being too similar to another game that already exists and is already very popular. An example I use for this is a game called Sulkin, which is another Euro game. I love Euro games that uses these gears that turn to reflect the passage of time in the game. And we've gotten a number of submissions of games that use these gears because people know that I love Sulkin, so they submit these games to Stonemaier Games. But every time I play one, I'm like, well, this is cool, but it's not as good as Sulkin. So it doesn't even get past the submission stage because I know Sulkin is already out there with a great use of the gears. Even though I would love to have another game that uses the gears in a cool way. So there are other answers to this question I could have, but I would say that one of the biggest things is for it to stand out and be unique and not be really, really similar to an existing game, both in terms of theme and mechanisms. Caden says, have I had any ideas for the topic or setting, but just couldn't make a game out of it? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have. So I use a list-making app called Trello, Trello, to keep track of two different categories of things. One is like general ideas of games, often themes for games, and the other is interesting mechanisms that I want to use at some point. And they're separate columns because they don't always match up. And I have all these themes and settings and worlds that I'm excited to do something with, but I haven't been able to match them with another mechanism or a core mechanism, an interesting mechanism that really fits that theme. So yeah, there are quite a few of those so far in my list, and I wouldn't be surprised if many other designers encountered that same thing. Parker says, do I believe the popularity of video games will eventually almost take over the market of board games, or will there always be a market for board games due to the appeal of the in-person social interaction? Yes, for that reason, and I think many other reasons as well. I think board games, almost oddly enough, given the advantages that video games and digital games have over board games, I think board games will persist. I think part of it is the social interaction. I think part of it is the tactile nature, the table presence of games. I think part of it is, I mentioned this cyclical theory on I have a blog entry about this, about why board games continue to be popular. And one of my theories is that if you say you got into board games and then in a few years after college you have kids and you end up playing board games with your kids, and so they grow up playing board games, and then they have kids and they grow up playing board games and they're sharing those games with their friends. So I think board games are so family friendly, whereas video games aren't always as family friendly, that I think we'll see that persist. I think we'll see board games persist for quite some time. Kyle says, is there something specific from your college education that has particularly helped me as a game designer? Not really. I'm hesitant to say that to college students. I went to Washington University in St. Louis. I had a great time there. It was a great school. I studied Japanese and international business, and I spent a year abroad in Japan. But I'm not sure that anything I really learned specifically at WashU helped me as a game designer. Excuse me, hit the camera there. I know the things that have really influenced me haven't even been as a game designer, but it have been more from a business side of things that were more experiential that happened before or after college. The one thing I think of maybe, Kyle, because I think you all might be writing from a creative writing class. So the ability to have a thick enough skin to hear feedback and digest it and decide what feedback is actually good for you to implement is a great skill, and I think college is a great time to learn that skill, whether it's a creative writing class or another class where you are submitting something to your peers that is personal and important to you, and you're getting feedback about it. I think that is a wonderful skill to learn, and college is a fairly safe environment to learn that skill. I think that can really help people, can help you as a game designer later. Jacques says, how did I find Elizabeth Hargrave and her game Wingspan? What makes her a great game developer? So Elizabeth submitted her game Wingspan to us, I believe through our normal submission form, which is on our website. But we were able to meet with Elizabeth at Gen Con, a gaming convention, a couple summers ago. I think it was 2016. And she officially pitched the game to us there. And it was there that I saw two things that really stood out about Elizabeth. One was kind of what I just said to Kyle, that Elizabeth was great at receiving feedback. I could tell that she was not only listening to it and hearing it, she was taking notes. And I also really respected that later on, when she resubmitted the game to us, that she had digested that feedback and not just blanketly accepted all of it. She had tried some things and they worked. She had tried some other things that we suggested and it didn't work. And she didn't just incorporate that into the game because we said we wanted her to. Because I didn't want that. I want a designer to hear all that feedback, but then make smart choices for the game by playtesting the game with other people and seeing what works and actually doesn't work. So I saw that from Elizabeth from the start. The other thing I saw from her was her ability to design a lot of different cards. I think this is a great game design challenge if you want to test your skills as a game designer. Pick a game you love that uses cards, like Viticulture uses a bunch of visitor cards, like cards with unique abilities, and design 36 more cards for that game. Elizabeth did that, but she already had like 100 cards designed for Wingspan. It's really tough to design unique cards in that way. And I was really impressed by her ability to do that. And so I knew the core game, even though the core game would change quite a bit over the next 18 months, 2 years, that I knew that she had that core skill of designing unique cards where the mechanisms match the theme. That's a great skill to have. And I knew I was excited to work with her due to that. Justin says, getting to the end of the questions here, just a few more questions here. Justin says, as a publisher, what part of a game must resonate with a large number of people to be successful? I ask because Wingspan seems like a very niche subject. So this is similar to the question that we saw a few minutes ago from Ellie. So I think my question is actually pretty much the same here, Justin. I think the mechanisms must, especially for hobby gamers, the mechanisms must make them excited, must make them feel clever, must give them important challenges to overcome in the game and interesting puzzles to overcome. So I think it all comes down to the mechanisms for hobby board gamers. Now, many hobby board gamers will say they care more about the theme, and I think that's great. But if you have a wonderful theme on a game that sucks, no one's going to play it. No one's going to play it more than once. So I think those mechanisms must make players really feel clever and give them interesting, meaningful decisions throughout the game. We have another Justin over here who says, why do I think competitive games draw so many players to them, and what aspects does your personal best game, real or made up, combine? Okay. Justin is asking what elements are looked for in like a perfect game. So it's interesting that you mentioned competitive games, because there actually are a significant number of gamers who prefer cooperative games. I think the split in my latest survey was around 40% to 60%, 40% preferring cooperative games. So I don't just think it's competitive games, it's tabletop games in general. My personal best game. So my favorite game ever, and has been for quite some time, is a game called The Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I love this game because it's easy to teach and play. It plays in about 60 to 75 minutes, so you can play it more than once at game night. You can play that at another game at game night. And like I mentioned a second ago to the other Justin, there's so many interesting, meaningful decisions in it, and it's a very rewarding game. There's some games that are very punishing throughout the gameplay. A lot of cooperative games fall into that category. Many competitive games do. But I like games that reward you. That's why I play games. I want to be rewarded when I play games. And I think Castles of Mad King Ludwig does that so well. You're playing these tiles, you're creating something weird and zany, and you're gaining all these rewards and positive feedback as you do so. It also has a nice I price you choose mechanism, which is one of my favorite mechanisms in games. I cut you choose, I price you choose. Dalton, this is the last question here. This is from Dalton. Dalton says, what lessons can video game designers learn from today's board games? That's an excellent question. And it's actually, I ask myself the reverse of that question a lot. What can I, as a game designer, tabletop game designer, learn from digital game designers? Even though I don't play a lot of digital games, I watch a lot of videos about them. And I also listen to a great podcast called The Psychology of Video Games, maybe just Psychology of Games, that has some really interesting information about things that video game designers do that I can learn from as a tabletop game designer. But let's see, what can video game designers learn from tabletop game designers? That is a great question. I think so. Like I mentioned earlier, some of the great things about tabletop games is that you are interacting with people in a tangible, visible space that you can see. And so, but video games already do that so well. Video games have beautiful aesthetics. Yeah, it's not tactile, but that's the difference between video games and tabletop games. That is a really great question, Dalton, and I don't know if I have a real answer for it because I don't know. I have heard from video game designers that sometimes they playtest. Actually, I heard this from the game designers who did, what is the game? It's like the most famous online card game. It's by Blizzard. I'm sure you all are thinking of it right now. It's one of these famous online card games that they playtested it in paper form first because it was much easier for them to do that than to put it through all the coding work. So they were just drawing out cards on index cards and playtesting that way before they did any coding because they didn't want to waste their time on coding just to have to undo it later. So perhaps that is one lesson that video game designers can learn from board game designers, that minimum viable product idea of working on something just to get it to the table and see how it works before investing a lot of time into a fancy prototype, whether it's digital or cardboard. That's the end of the questions here. Thank you so much from the students at Professor Perkle and Professor Push's class for asking these questions. It was wonderful to have these questions, especially since the comments aren't working on Facebook today, so I can't see questions from anybody else today. So this has been really, really helpful. Thank you for your time. I, of course, still have plenty of live cast time here, so and I have no idea what questions people are asking. So anyway, I'll check on Twitter here to see if anyone is posting questions on Twitter. That's one way to get through to me. And Connor very helpfully was sending me messages to see if that would help. Oh, Connor is posting. Oh, thank you, Connor. You are awesome. This is really awesome. Connor from Inside Up Games is doing an awesome thing right now. He is messaging me the questions through to my messenger. So I actually do have the questions. I can answer them here. Thank you, Connor. This is really awesome. Connor says, well, actually, these aren't coming from Connor himself. These are coming from people, and Connor's copy and pasting them over. So, well, actually, this might be from Connor himself. Okay. Connor says, Chris says, how are Biddy and Walter adjusting to the move? Yeah, so I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I moved this week, and I'm in a new place. And the cats, they're kind of behind me right now. I have two cats. They were very scared during the actual move process, but they are now adjusting pretty well. Their first night was a little rough, a lot of whining, but they're coming around. Charles asks, how are the new digs? New condo, house, still in St. Louis? Yes, I am still in St. Louis, and I now live with my girlfriend Megan, and the new digs are wonderful. It's wonderful to live here with Megan, and the new place is also very cool. I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, I'm still in St. Louis. Juan says, I just want to know if there's any update for the release of Wingspan on Steam. I think Wingspan is already available. Oh, I'm guessing you're talking about like the full AI digital version of Wingspan. I don't have an update about that. I know they're working hard on it, and I think they're still aiming for the first quarter of 2020. Keith says, do I consider myself an analysis paralysis gamer? I definitely do not, Keith. I try to be very aware of the other people around me at the table, and if I'm doing something that is bothering them, I generally notice it. I think I do a pretty good job of noticing the things that I'm doing that might have a negative impact on the other gamers around me. And I think analysis paralysis is one of those things that I think can end up bothering people and can hurt the experience of other people. So I really try not to do that. And if I am doing it, it's only on maybe one big turn a game, and I am aware of it, and I apologize for it, and I just try to get past it. Just make a decision, just move on. Florian says, I heard some comparison between Tapestry and Hadara. Do I think the comparison is justified? Not really. I guess they're kind of both Civ game, or I truly believe this Tapestry is a Civ game. I know there's some debate about that. And then, Hadara was kind of Civ light. I really did enjoy it. Hadara does a lot of things that Tapestry doesn't do. It has different ages of cards. Tapestry doesn't divide things into ages. Hadara uses income tracks, and it uses tracks, but the tracks in Tapestry are very different. The tracks are the action spaces in Tapestry. So I think they're pretty different. If someone ever says like, oh, they both have tracks, yeah, they both kind of have income tracks, but a lot of games have income tracks or income. But the tracks in Tapestry on the advancement tracks are very different than Hadara. Connor keeps kindly reminding me that I can mouse over my video, click more options, then click the comments on off button, but it's just not giving me that option today, Connor. I don't see that, unfortunately. David says, is some Wingspan expansion on the production way with South American birds? Yeah, our plan is to do a different expansion for every continent for Wingspan. Simon says, what board games do you look at and think, wish I had designed that? That definitely happens. When I saw Mysterium, I thought that. I think that about Sulkin. I don't have my shelf of games to look at right now because I haven't moved my games in yet. I have my shelf, but not the games on the shelf over here. What other games? I mean, if you ever look at one of my favorite game mechanism videos and see me just ecstatic about a mechanism, that often is a sign that I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that mechanism? Rickert says, how would I run a marketing campaign to help subscribers to help back your upcoming Kickstarter project? So my main method that I advocate for getting word out about your game and your product really isn't about your game at all. It's about just being a part of the community and being helpful, and like what Connor is doing right now is awesome. Connor is sending me questions so I can answer your questions. Connor isn't benefiting from this. Connor is just being helpful, and I like that, and that's awesome. So just be helpful and kind and generous to people in the community that you are launching a Kickstarter in, and also have a home base for your content, for your specific content. So make sure that as you start to talk about your game with people, online, in person, wherever it is, that they have a way to go find out more information and that they can sign up to get more information when your Kickstarter goes live. Ideally an e-newsletter, but also a Facebook page can be pretty effective at that as well. Barbara says, how long did it take you to design Tapestry once you decided to go ahead with the idea? It was about 18 months. About 18 months. Some parts slower than others, some parts much more intense than others. Russell says, speaking of rulebooks, the podcast I'm a part of has talked about the idea of doing audio versions of the game. Sorry, I skipped it. Audio versions of the board game rulebooks. Is there a copyright issue with that kind of use of the rulebook? That's a great question. I don't know if it counts as plagiarism. Like if you're just reading the rulebook out loud, is that plagiarism, and doesn't even really matter all that much if you aren't profiting from it, and in a way you're helping the designer by doing that. If you are creating your own version of the rulebook, you're like talking people through the rules in audio version, I definitely don't think there's any issue with that at all. Rickard, another question for Rickard. He says, I am currently building a new board game at the same time as building a Kickstarter project for later this year. Currently struggling to get subscribers to sign up for the launch. So yeah, I guess that kind of tags into your question a minute ago, Rickard, about how to get subscribers, how to get people interested. But let's see another way that could help. If you have a representative image of your game, something that represents the vision and the art for the game, you could put that on Board Game Geek and see how the reception of that is. Sometimes that can work its way to the front page and people can start to talk about it. There are a bunch of blog entries on my blog that you can look into about this, about how to build an audience before you launch the Kickstarter. There's a whole section about that under my crowdfunding Kickstarter lessons section of the blog. Adrian says, what are my thoughts on the law of attraction applied to how we experience board games positively or negatively? The law of attraction. Um, can you be more specific, Adrian? I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to there. Gerald says, game design requires mathematics a lot of the time. Did you enjoy mathematics in high school? In high school, I very much did, yes. Once I got to college, I did not enjoy them nearly as much, but I was very good at them in high school. That's probably part of the reason why I enjoyed them. Um, I don't know if it's helped me a lot as a game designer, though, because I'm not, that isn't my forte. That's why I lean heavily on blind playtesting to figure out what's balanced and imbalanced. And even then, I miss things. And I rely pretty heavily on our Automa team. They're very good they're better at the math of it than I am. Brian says, having studied Japanese and spending a year in Japan, what is your favorite Japanese themed game? It's Yedo, definitely Yedo. He says that Shogun Samurai Swords was one of my favorites in the 80s while I was in high school. Dana says that she could hear a kitty crying in the background. Yeah, I have doors closed so that I don't have too much noise that goes out to where my girlfriend, who also works from home, is here. But Biddy was crying out there, and Biddy eventually figured out how to open the door, which is, well, he's a smart boy. So he's in here now and not crying. He's sleeping. Both cats are sleeping. Joshua says, based on my list of games that you like in spite of the mechanisms, yeah, there's a video I did about exceptions to my gaming rules, like game mechanisms and things in games that I generally don't enjoy, but that I list games that I actually do enjoy that have those mechanisms and themes. Do I ever consider using things like rounds to instantly rule out game submissions for Stonemaier? Anything that's on our submission form is something that truly could rule out your game immediately and will rule out your game immediately. Rounds are not on there, but phases are. And I'm talking about the types of phases where it's like the whole game is broken down into phases. Like everyone do this one thing. Okay, now everyone do this other thing. Everyone do this other thing. Everyone do this other thing. Then we rinse and repeat. That is almost an immediate disqualifier for me because it generally the flow of that type of style of game just doesn't work for me. Chad says, how many prototypes does Alan receive and playtest? Well, there are a couple different filters here. So we get, I would say, a couple dozen, maybe a dozen submissions every week, and Alan reviews them. And then for some of them, he's curious about them, and they fit our guidelines, and so we ask for more information, maybe a video playthrough, maybe a rule book. And then of them, usually once a month, he picks one game for us to playtest together to see if it's any good. Doug says, as a new designer, how do I gather people outside of my normal gaming group for playtesting? I think one of the best ways to do that is to find a meetup group, like meetup.org, meetup.com, one of the two. Find a meetup group of local game designers and do it that way. Also, going to a local convention can help you meet new designers and it's one of those things where you playtest their game, they playtest your game. And that can be a way to start to build up some rapport in your area and to find people that you really connect with and people who like your style and want to playtest more of your stuff. Brian asks, what's my favorite game to play with 8, 9, or 10 players? I feel like higher player counts lend themselves to either social deduction or simultaneous games only. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's definitely true. Telestrations I love at high player counts. When I Dream can work at high player counts. We Are Doomed, I think that can play at higher player counts well, although I've only played that with 3, so I can't necessarily say that. Sorry, I don't have my game collection on my shelf yet, so I know there's some games that I'm missing on here. Just One, I think, goes up to 7 or 8. I love Avalon. Avalon's a lot of fun. Sean says, what do I think about the criticism that the civs and Tapestry are not being balanced? Well, I've seen the data. I can see that there are some civilizations that definitely do seem underpowered compared to others. And it looks like there are, it depends on which data you look at. So far, it looks like that there are just a few civs that are underpowered, and there might be one civ that, when played really, really well, is overpowered. And I'm totally fine with that criticism. I mean, we did our best to balance it, but I know that there's a big difference between having hundreds and hundreds of blind playtests and having thousands of people play the real thing. So But fortunately, I kind of knew that might happen, and that's why I built something into the game that says at the end of the game, report your the winning civilization and their final score, so that we have that data to go by and to make adjustments along the way. Hopefully, not adjustments to the rules of the civilizations, but just kind of VP buffs to help some of the weaker civilizations. Yeah, that's kind of the general idea, and maybe a VP punishment for some of the really, really good civs. Ernani asks, Alan told us on an earlier livecast that you guys passed on Anachrony. Do you regret it? Also, have I played the full version? Yeah, David submitted a very early version of Anachrony to us, and I don't even know if it had, I think it maybe had the full rulebook at that point, but we thought the idea was really cool. The idea of sending things from the future back to yourself is really, really cool. We love that idea, but the rest of the game just didn't seem to fit our style of game. And so I don't regret that we passed it. I'm glad that it's done very well, I think, for the company that makes it. But I think they did a great job with it. I think they did a better job with it than we would have. So I have no regrets on passing on it. Joshua asked with the basic game and the expansion for Wingspan to come out both the same year, but the next expansion not due until 2021. Well, that's not necessarily true. We might have it ready by 2020. It just depends. Maybe that's what it says on our news page, but I think it could easily be a 2020 release. Do you have a year we're hoping? So I think I'm kind of hoping to have one a year. So that's probably a typo if I have 2021. I'm hoping to have one expansion a year. And so what would that put the final continent at? We're in 2019, so 2025, 2024, 2025. Wang asks, how many hours do I spend reading for pleasure? I generally try to read about a half hour before I go to bed every night, so about a half hour a day. Fiction. I read quite a bit of nonfiction online, like blogs and things like that. News. Chad asks, what are a few of my favorite 2 to 4 player games that work great at 2 players? That sounds like that could be a top 10 list for my Sunday sit down. Favorite 2 to 4 player games that work great at 2 players. Castles of Beck and Ludwig, I'll throw out that one. I think that one works great at 2 players. Solken, I think, works pretty well at 2, although you need to have some ghost players in there. But I played it with 2 and had a lot of fun with it. I'm just thinking through like my best of 2 to 4 player. I think Azul plays pretty well with 2 players. Those are a few that come to mind. Maddie says, what did I ever look into the reference card confusion in Tapestry, and do I plan on improvements for future printings? Yes. So I got some clarification from that from a few people, and I figured it out. It's the icons. The icons refer to the tracks and not the actual core mechanism. So yeah, on a future printing, we're just going to switch out those icons with the core benefit icon. Josh asks, if I retired right now from the board game world, what would my proudest, happiest achievement in my journey as a board game designer and company owner be? Oh, that's so hard. That's so hard because I've had so many like little moments of people reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, my game has helped me connect with my autistic son or daughter," or my wife never likes to play games, but she'll bring Wingspan to me. So I don't know, but there's also the big moments like some of our games have done so well that they have helped other companies exist and thrive and given people jobs, and I think that's awesome. And I love that we were able to bring life to more than just my job and just Alan's part-time job and Morton's part-time job. I think that's wonderful as well. Yeah, a lot of unexpected things that came with that have come with the success of my company that would be unfortunate if they went away. So I don't know if there's one single proudest moment. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question, though. Amy asks, are the rules about what % of a game needs to be different before it's not unique, or it's more of a courtesy thing? In music, if if it's even considered similar, it's considered plagiarism. Um, so the place where you cross the line is if you just slightly reword the rule book and slap a different theme on there and call it your own. I think that's what board gamers like to avoid. And I also think if it's similar to other games, it just won't be marketable. If your game is really similar to another game, people would, and that game is already well received, people won't care about your game. What percent? It's hard to say what percent. I would say I don't even know if I could put it down to percent because it's not like I think if you took two games that you loved and you mashed them together and did something cool with that, yeah, maybe it's like 30% from one game and 30% from another, but you mash them together and they become their own thing. But if you're just taking one specific game and maybe taking something out of it and putting something into that game and calling it your own, I think that's too similar. Now, I think it can vary a little bit. So, an example would be Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. There is a version of that that's like Cthulhu themed that's done by a completely different publisher. And it's a very similar rule set, but they put so much time and energy into doing their own version of it. There's a ton of writing that went into the stories that they wrote. If anyone can, if you all are seeing in the comments, if someone can post in the comments what game I'm talking about. It's the Cthulhu Sherlock Holmes, basically. But they put so much of an investment into it that even though it is almost the exact same mechanisms, very, very similar, I don't think anyone holds it against them because they did their own thing with it. They truly did their own thing with it. So if you can show people that you put a huge investment of time and maybe even money into it to do your own version of it, your own unique twist on it, I think people can be forgiving of that. Tim says, I read that John Williams, oh really? John Williams is conducting in St. Louis on November 1st. That's really cool. Thank you for letting me know. That's awesome. Charles says, Megan also works from home? Yes, she does. And maybe someday she'll make a guest appearance. Joshua asks, but I liked Phases in Edge of Darkness. Yeah, but as I said in my Edge of Darkness video, that was a strong exception to my gaming rule. I was surprised that I liked it so much in Edge of Darkness. I think they were necessary in Edge of Darkness. Would I have ruled out Edge of Darkness if they had submitted it to me? Maybe. Well, no, probably not, though, because Edge of Darkness has so many other unique, weird things going on in it that I think it would have caught our attention and at least tried it, and maybe we would have found a way to not use phases. But typically, because like I see it as the designer's responsibility to work on that first. We can work with the designer to develop that out, but that takes a lot of time. And so I'd rather people just submit games to us that we already are interested in because of the types of things that we want in the game. Kaz says, hey Jamie, new location. Yeah, some of you may not realize I moved over the past few days. So I am now in a new condo, living with my girlfriend Megan, and this is my new office here. I know it's not as aesthetically pleasing as my old office because my game shelf is off to the side and I have a cabinet of secrets behind me. But I think hopefully it'll look nicer over time. Chaz says, moving can be fun because it gives you a chance to redesign rooms. Do I have any cool plans for redesigning my office space? Yeah, I mean, I'm already working on it. This will be an office/small game room, and we have more gaming space outside in the living area. But yeah, it's a work in progress. It is exciting to be able to reshape it. Kaz says, also, what is my favorite time story scenario? I think Prophecy of Dragons is followed by the Pirate one. Yeah. Pirate one is maybe the second to the last one. I also really like the Egyptian one. Chad says, I recently went back and watched my Viticulture Kickstarter video. Hilarious. How much fun was it making that video? Who wrote the script and directed it? I wrote and directed it and acted in it, unfortunately, for everyone who has to watch it. And I'm curious, if you can send me, how did you watch it? I've been trying to watch it. I wanted to show it to Megan, actually, the other day. And Kickstarter would not play the video for me. And I don't know why. I tried on mobile devices. I tried on my PC. So I don't know how you found it. If you found it on YouTube, Chad, could you send me the link? Because I can't find it, and I'd love to watch it sometime. Jeff says, what designer's live blog would I watch as consistently as your audience watches yours? I don't watch any other Facebook livecast consistently, but I do like popping in on James Hudson's livecast. I think his is really interesting. There's an artist whose name I'm forgetting, maybe Tatiana, maybe, who just has some, she just like paints live and it's kind of soothing to watch it happen. Who else? Marshall Britt has one that I tune into from time to time. There are a few others I'm sure that I'm forgetting right here, but James Hudson's the main one that comes to mind. He does it fairly consistently. Miles asks, have I started finishing the newest Red Rising book yet? I'm about halfway through. So yes, but not finished. Sean says, where do you want us to log the Tapestry scores, players, civilizations, etc.? It says so on the last page of the rulebook, and it's also on the main Tapestry page of our website. Jeff asks, is it difficult for you to not voice my political opinions given that you have so many public outlets? Maybe not difficult. I think I express my principles and beliefs quite a bit, actually. They're not directly political usually, but I do express my opinions and beliefs. Often in my personal blog is where they come out a little bit more. But yeah, I would say it's not overly hard. I have my beliefs and principles. I respect that other people have their different beliefs and principles, and so I don't feel the need to really express mine all that often until I do, and then I do. Brian says, have I played Tussy Mussy yet? Yeah, I played the prototype. I haven't received my final version yet from the Kickstarter. It might have gotten mailed to my own place. And he says he's played it a few times but hasn't won yet. I'm going to do a few more questions, guys, and then I'm going to go because I started a little bit early today, and Connor is doing an awesome job posting these questions, but I know it's probably a little annoying for him to do so. Connor from Inside Up Games is posting them via Messenger so I can read them because I'm not getting the comments on my live cast today. Jeff says, what board game company is on the rise? Who is where you were 2 to 5 years ago? Let's see. Is it? I always forget the name. I think it's Thundergriff. I think is doing much better than we were 2 to 5 years ago, but I think they're very much on the rise. I think Lucky Duck Games, definitely there. Who else? Those are the two that really come to mind. And I'm always hesitant to answer this question because there's so many Inside Up Games actually from Connor. I think Connor is where we were maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and definitely his company's on the rise. Kent says, what is the Mythos Tales? Mythos Tales is the one that I was referring to that's similar to Sherlock Holmes. All right, let me take one more question. Looks like Connor's typing one last question here, then I'll take off. Oh, and actually games that I played this last week. I played Cartographers twice, which was awesome. Actually, that's an upcoming game company. They're doing wonderful things. Forgetting that's Keith Mateja. Plane Crafters I played, really enjoyed that. And I played the Wingspan expansion last Thursday. All right, last question. Tim says, are you planning anything special for the upcoming Extra Life? Will you be joining any events in your area? It doesn't coincide well with my schedule, but we are doing our annual charity thing, which I haven't revealed what it will be this year, but we are doing our annual charity thing in early November. So, yeah, that'll be fun. All right, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all for joining me today, and yeah. Kent says, viticulture has phases where workers are taken back. That's more upkeep. I think upkeep is different than phases. If you have upkeep where you just do a few things real quick, I think that's very different than phases where you're having everyone do something at the same time. Viticulture is kind of broken into worker placement seasons, but it's integrated, I think, really well into the interface of the game. Okay. All right, Joshua, I'll do Joshua's. Joshua's will be last. Joshua says, with my recent post about the power of spoilers, do I have any additional thoughts about spoilers after the presumably accidental Wingspan spoiler? I mean, that was barely a spoiler. I'm more concerned when something leaks that wasn't meant to be shared for quite some time, whereas that photo was meant to be shared like a day or two later. So that was fine, yeah. All right, thank you, Connor. Thank you all for your questions. Hopefully next week the comments will be working as normal. Chocolate of the day. I gotta do chocolate of the day. I had a great cupcake from a place called The Cup yesterday, a chocolate peanut butter cupcake. So that'll be my chocolate of the day because I have some leftover that I'm gonna munch on a little bit later. All right, thank you all for joining me. Have a great day, and I will see you next week. Take care.